My name is Jennifer Lane. I'm with the State Housing Trust Fund at the Department of Commerce, and we have a lovely panel here to talk about managing the dream. If you have any questions, we'll probably wait to an open section to pass around the microphone and answer any questions. And if you have questions, feel free to put them on the Hoover chat. We'll be monitoring that too. And I'll just go ahead and get it kicked off. I'll let the panelists introduce themselves so that I don't botch their names in any way.
My name is Sidonie Harkness. I'm with Bellwether Housing. I'm a portfolio manager. Been in affordable housing since 2010.
I'm Suzanne Koval. I work for GMD Development. We're a for-profit development company that has properties in Alaska, Montana, and Seattle. I've been in affordable housing since 2006. And so, yeah, love it.
Jody Hunter. I am currently the Director of Compliance at H&N. We are also a for-profit. Again, like Suzanne, 2006, we've seen all the changes. We've seen all the bumps. We have had to navigate. We have had to change. We have had to adjust for a couple of decades now. So we're just kind of here to share the things that we've been through and really help you guys understand when the change happens, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so today we're going to cover communication and community engagement. We're going to talk about how do we reset expectations post-COVID, that through a lot of changes in the expectations of management and residents. And, we used to get it all done, and we need to get back to getting it all done. But how? So let's just see who's in the room. Let's show of hands. How many of you are housing developers? Ooh, a lot of you. All right,
Which is
captive
great.
Audience. Close the door, lock it,
love
don't
you
let them
guys.
out. Agencies or funders? Okay, that's another good mix. Asset managers. Ooh. Wow, we have a really good mixed bag. Property managers. Yes, perfect. All right. How many of you are facing, have a lease up going on or facing some lease up issues? All right. What kind of issues are you facing in your lease ups?
Shout it out.
Shout it out.
It's slower than normal.
Slower than normal. Are you guys having issues with offering concessions or competing with market units? Yes. Yes? Yes. How long, what was your expectation for a lease-up period previously?
About 10 a week.
10 a week, okay. What are you seeing now?
It depends on the property, but about half that.
Okay.
Maybe a little better.
I'm doing a property up north, and we started pre-leasing in May. We had a little bit delay with COO. COO is scheduled for 10/23. I currently have 16 approved applicants, including 5 that timed out because we had to delay the CO. We do have prospect. I don't get the commitment. They show up for appointment. The paperwork is too hard, and then they just ghost us, literally.
How many are having collection issues at your properties? Yeah, okay. Compliance issues. Are y'all getting your compliance done on time, completely, correctly? Yeah. Residents just showing up with their paperwork in hand, ready to go? No? Oh, laughing. Yeah, that's the dream, right? That's what we're talking about. Site cash flow issues. All right. Having little issues with the mortgage payment coming due before the rents get paid? Yeah? Okay.
So how do we prioritize everything? Everything's priority number one right now, right? Developers, you guys have a goal. We got to get these, we got to get them going, all the way down to the property managers that also have goals. How do we prioritize what is the importance? Where do we look at this? You guys, there is 30 days in a month. even though we don't feel like it. We go to work, and it's got to be done right now. And we've got to get back to understanding that we have that time throughout the month to prioritize what is important. It's a marathon, guys. Can't just get it done anymore. And we want to focus mostly on just being consistent, right? Be consistent in your day-to-day. And if you're consistent, you can move forward, figure out what's urgent, break things into the smaller pieces, make it manageable for yourselves. And we all came up with this one together. So those of you that are at the upper levels, I know that your guys' jobs are hard, because in our company, we work with our developers also, right? Not easy. None of these jobs are easy, but it is really important for everyone to understand managers are exhausted. They are tired, and we want them to manage these multi-million-dollar properties effective, but they're tired. So how do we make it manageable for them?
And I'd like to add about our managers. I have a team right now, and they're not even a year in. I give them the training. They're very capable. They're very much different for all of them. They have one thing in common. I think it's grit to manage resident issues, mental health crisis. But you know, it used to take me 10 years ago to do like compliance paperwork, for example, maybe 20 minutes, you know, with a client. And now it takes about an hour and a half. That's just for one person, right? So you have mom, dad, and then a kid over 18, you know, you do the math. We also have language barriers and whatnot. I mean, there's more at stake than we think. And when we come at them and we like, especially after COVID, where there was no necessarily like site or people at the site, and now we asking them to be in the office, open the door, residents are tired, they're tired, and they can't really reach their goals in timely manner, and I think that's kind of disheartening. So kind of boosting the team to make sure they can achieve compliance, rent collections. I don't know, sometimes I feel like throwing the towel in the air, and I try to support them the best I can, and they're doing a great job overall, but I think we need to be mindful of what they're struggling with every day.
One of the things we've always talked about in property management is managing to the lease. That's our agreement with our residents on how we're going to operate our buildings, how we're going to get folks to pay their rent, do their part, put the trash in the dumpster, have, you know, be good neighbors, right? And it's gotten much more difficult to manage to the lease with all of the restrictions in place.
But even if legal is not processing the way we are used to and the way it was, you should still manage to the lease, right? Our residents don't know that, right? They don't know that it takes 6 months to get them to legal. They just need to be told, hey, here's what your lease says. This is what you're obligated to. It is required that you do your compliance paperwork. We don't care, but in order to stay, you have to, right? So I think that's a really important part. I think we're on to compliance. So we're going to talk a little bit about the new age of compliance. Yes, you are correct. They don't show up. So what have we done? You still have to give out your notices. They have to be timely. We can't send out legal notices as fast as we used to be able to. Getting them into legal is a whole different issue, but our obligation is to show the state that we have made the attempt, correct? Like at a minimum, we have to continue to do that. We found a lot of failure where they were overwhelmed and they weren't giving out notices. That's a critical part when you go back to your companies and your policies and your procedures. Those notices need to go out because you can't do anything legally if they don't. Now, how do we get people in? I will tell you, it's a split for us. We decided we were going to be transparent. We are being successful at certain sites. We have other ones that are failing, though. What are my successful sites doing? They're communicating with their residents, right? It's a different world. You can't just send a notice and they don't just show up anymore. You got to call them. You got to convince them that they want to do this paperwork in order to stay. We have been doing self-certs pretty effectively because we're putting it on the door or offering to email it to them. Here you go. Return this when you can. I have had to make compromises in my department. I like really tidy paperwork. Self-certs are not very tidy when you have them coming back from their house. But that's the compromise I'm willing to make. Is the data there? Did they fill out the student thing? And does it make sense? Okay, I'm moving on. Purple pen, I guess it's purple pen. Let's move on with our lives, right? But we have found it very effective for the resident, right? Some of them are technology savvy. We're good. Send that out, get it back. I don't actually, in our company, do annuals online. I need to know what you're saying is accurate. We need to have that conversation. So the community engagement and communication is your most critical part. If you're having failure, you need to be talking to the site and asking them, are you actually communicating or are you just dropping notices? The people who are dropping notices are not getting the effective engagement that you need in order to process this. We make sure we're prepared for our full certs, right? Review the year before. Be prepared so that you know when someone says something that doesn't make sense from the first year, you know to ask that follow-up question so that you're not sending it to your compliance department and they're coming back at you 3 weeks later going, but that changed. That's stuff that can happen live time if you pay attention. We're talking, and I'm gonna look into this, a secure link for your residents to be able to upload bank statements, City of Seattle, right? You don't want them sending it through email, but we need to make it easier for them to produce the product to us. I need your 401k. Here's your secure link. It's a really good method to look into. Again, COVID happened, and it was a struggle for everyone, and it shifted our whole world, but it is now back to normal. And we are still sitting in a methodology of, well, they don't want to, so I don't have to make them. No, we're now obligated. We have to get this done. This is part of the world that we live in, right? It's an obligation we make when we sign the LURA, right? Like, we are obligated to do this, and we need to be able to communicate with the residents. Hey, great, we'd love to have you, but this is required. So what we do is we prep them in the beginning. When is the best time to tell somebody something? Before they get the keys, right? They want something from you before they get the keys. That is your best time to tell them what their obligations are. So, and another thing we've seen is check your judgment at the door. I hear it day in, day out. Well, but those, them, they don't want to. They're driving a new car. I don't care. It doesn't matter. It's not our job to matter. What is our job? Were you qualified? The rest of it doesn't matter.
How are you getting folks who owe thousands of dollars to come in and do their compliance paperwork?
So that's a really good question. Bifurcate it. I think that's in our slide later, but it is not about the rent payment. Are you going to be okay with me if I say, hey, I know that you're struggling and I get the rent thing and we can deal with that later, but what I need from you today is I just need this paperwork. Because by the way, if you get your rent caught up, guess what? You can't stay unless you do this. So separate it. They are different items, different issues. If you're in the compliance and you're trying, leave the worry about the fact that they owe thousands behind you. Because what if they are able to get that payment, right? There's a lot of big payments that come in from other sources. They can't stay if they didn't do the papers. So
Does any property managers have any questions, comments, so maybe tricks, what they do at their properties to make things happen?
I just have a question. So one of the issues that we're facing is that we have folks that are, like you said, behind on rent, and they have to do their research, and they're not complying, and then we're having to sort of triage between maybe other issues too, maybe behavioral lease violation issues. And unfortunately, sometimes it gets to the point of we have sent out the notices, we send the 30-day notice to comply, and then we get to eviction, and we can only do that on one issue. Mm-hmm. So my sort of take on it, and tell me if I'm right or wrong on this, is if they're super behind on rent and they owe a lot, and then they have the research not done and behavioral issues, is then the priority then to say, let us move forward on eviction for not completing the research? Because I think a property management tends to go with, sometimes with the rent.
Yeah, and I hear exactly what you're saying, and
Okay.
it's very, very valid, right? What do you proceed with? Here's the thing. I will tell you from our legal stuff, proceed with your non-payment. Don't proceed with your compliance. It's still a non-compliant issue, but what happens is they'll get into legal for compliance, and it's like last second, and they're like, oh, let me fill out those 4 pages, and now you got to keep them. And now you're keeping someone who has a balance that you're having to start over with. Proceed with your non-payment, over behavioral, everything. If it's a non-payment, that's where you need to be. But you should always be trying to get them to do the paperwork.
And then if you do that, they're gonna get rental assistance.
No, and that happens. And you may have to start over. But I'm telling you,
like-
we have a lot of, and it used to be, and he's exactly right. It used to be the easiest way to do this was proceed with your compliance, right? It was cut and dry, done, over. We're not seeing the same thing that we used to. And with the process taking so long now, that is my advice. But again, should you never not communicate, you should always be communicating, always trying to get them to do it.
Well, then my question also, I forgot to add. So what if you have a 100% tax credit property, and you're then are dealing with someone not completing their research, and then you're out of compliance, and you're getting 8823s. When if you focus on the rent issue, and then they pay up their rent, then you are running into risk of.
But you can stipulate it if you're focusing on the rent. Part of the stipulation that in order for them to stay, if you're in a court level, you can stipulate you have to make the payment and you have to do your stuff, right? Put that in a stipulation.
Okay.
So we had another one.
I would say there's no right or wrong answer to that, and you just pick your priority.
And the methodology
right?
has changed. Absolutely.
Where am I going? Here?
Well, I will answer. The biggest thing I've found always is to communicate. I set an appointment for my things. If they're not there within 5 minutes, I call them and ask them, where are you? And every year I remind them that if you do not come and fill this paperwork out, you will lose your housing. It's worked.
Well, and I agree. And you guys, what I'm also seeing, and let me be really transparent, I'm Gen Xer. I don't know if that's apparent, but I'm a Gen Xer. I thought the millennials were going to kill me, right? I'm like, I got to buy you toys to make you work. What? Trinkets? I don't understand. But I figured out the millennials. Let me be very clear about the Gen Zers, though, because I own one. She will not pick up a phone and call any human on the planet. She doesn't want to. She doesn't have to. That was the eye-opener for me. During a training, one of the Gen Zers said, we've never had to. We get to pick and choose when we want to talk to people. We were given tablets and laptops and said, here you go. And I've always been, you gotta call. So what am I compromising on? I'm telling my Gen Zers, if email is your preferred communication, what I don't want to see is the demands. We don't email people and demand they do their paperwork, right? We have to email them and convince them to do their paperwork. So I've told my Gen Zers, email away. If that is your communication style, that is great. but it better be nice.
Oh, in response also, like both and, because we still need it at the end of the day. But putting dates on things of like, I need this by this date is really helpful. And then also everything in writing so that you have that for documentation for later.
Why do I always tell people, don't mess with the compliance department? There's a reason. Every time somebody goes, well, but you guys, I'm like, here's my documentation. We didn't, right? It is probably one of the departments that holds the most documentation of everything on a day-to-day basis, right? So.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about collections. So most of you raised your hand when you said you were having some collection issues. What do you need to collect each month to make your mortgage payment, your payroll, your utilities, your insurance, and all the other costs? Does your site manager know what that number is? Where are you finding the flexibility when you're not getting getting residents to come in and pay the rent, and you're having to go through the whole process to get paid? Like, a lot of times we're getting rent assistance, that's great, but most of the time we're not getting the rent assistance until folks are 6 months, 10 months, a year past due, right? Then we'll get sort of a big, we'll get to court and then they'll say, here's a check for $20,000 or whatever. But you're not counting on that to make your mortgage payment, right? So, our mortgage payments due, anywhere between the 6th and the 10th. Rent's due on the 1st. It's late after the 5th. Are people paying rent the same way they did before? The 1st to the 5th, you come in on the 6th, you've got hundreds of thousands of dollars in your, in your night box. We're not experiencing that right now, right? We are talking to folks I've been talking to, the three of us, we have anywhere from a 50 to 80% collection rate on a monthly basis. And that's over the whole month. That's not just the first week of the month. It used to be the first week of the month, most of our rent would come in and we would chase the last 20%, right? Now rent's just sort of trickling in throughout the month. Where are you finding the flexibility to make your mortgage payment on the 8th? Any ideas?
We're deferring our fees. So if a property has cash and we need to pay the mortgage, we're not going to make a property management fee.
So that affects all the way up across, right? So this is where everybody, and this is where, and when you're in these upper levels, because she asked me this, I have no idea. I've been with the company 17 years. I don't know when our mortgage payments due. And look what level I'm in. That is critical information that people need to know, right? We don't think they need to, but they do. They have to know it to understand the importance of our industry.
Yeah, and one thing I would add to that is it's not just the mortgage payment, but the debt also has a debt coverage ratio that the property needs to keep in order to, which is above the mortgage, right? 1.25 or whatever, 1.2. At the end of the year, now that becomes a problem if that wasn't met. And then if there's investors and the investors expect a return, there's a minimum number they need to have coming in to make that happen also. So the mortgage payment is just to kind of keep everything not zero, right, or below zero. But then you also have these other finance compliance goals that have to be met. And then we've started communicating that to our portfolio manager because they were asking about the mortgage payment. I'm like, the mortgage payment isn't the only thing that matters here. It's also you have to be 25% above that, and then also what about the investors who are expecting a return? So I just want to make sure that that's.
Yeah, I hear you, Leslie, and we've kind of, to be honest, we've thrown that out the window to some extent. We're spending the last week of the month going, do we have enough money in the operating account to pay the mortgage next week? And what do we need to do to get enough funding there before the mortgage comes out? Because it's on, they're all on auto withdrawals, and we can't have those accounts go negative, right? So yes, I hear you. Debt coverage ratio is important. That's an end of the year problem, right? That's an investor problem. And unfortunately, that's just where we're at right now. So that's why we're talking about this in this room, right? So developers, when you're closing the deals and you're trying to maximize the debt, we're in a new world. Folks aren't paying their rent. We're not getting rent in a way that we can count on from month to month, right? And so we need to figure out how to navigate to that. We're spending a lot of time and energy managing to that, right? So that's just real, sort of real talk.
I'm wondering if folks are implementing process or policy changes to incentivize folks to pay rent. During the ERPP, the eviction resolution program, we had these stringent, administratively burdensome requirements, which I completely get the intent. And the way that I'm looking at it is, we're coming off of these extremely stringent requirements with process maps that looked like a puzzle. And you can compare that to what we were doing before. What's the future? It's got to be somewhere in the middle. We have to do something different, because I don't see us going back to, hitting 90% rent collection off of where we're coming now. So I'm starting to think about what are those policy or process changes where, do we start to implement some of the things that were, pushed on us in terms of repayment agreements in a way that's more administratively burdensome, that encourages folks to pay. But I'm interested if other folks have implemented policy or process changes to try to incentivize folks to pay rent.
I have in some ways. So, like I said, my team is relatively new to affordable, not necessarily to property management. And one other thing I noticed is I give you 30-day notice. Well, first they were 14 days, right? And then they were 30-day. Oh, you didn't put the CARE Act. Oh, this guy. Okay, we can go to eviction. Oh, wait, we have the wrong font on the 30-day. And you didn't put the VAWA now. So here we go. And then and I got thrown out like so many times. It was just disheartening. And with my managers, we decided, okay, we have to try something different, right? So I'm like, do you know you're a resident by first name basis? Even if they haven't paid the rent, and I know the feeling and you want to reinforce the rule, I'm like, let's just throw that out the window. And let's wrap our arms around the delinquency and start to figure out who is paying, who is not paying. And then the first question is, can you pay your rent? And if you can't pay your rent, you can't stay here. It's a hard one, but at the same time, I'm like, I can't have rent for free. I have other obligations, and also to the community. So then we work with resident service, to find an exit strategy. For those who needs payment plan, it's the conversation is ongoing, right? And then you lose your job, and then you find another payment plan, right? But the point is they have to pay something. Having month without paying is not okay anymore. You have rental assistance coming, great. We'll take a promissory note. And the other thing is, you don't have to go to eviction. You can move out. Let's sign a mutual term. For those who have difficult behavior issue, I'll give you $2,000 to move out. I mean, you laugh, but that saved me so much time, money, and effort at the end that I was just like, let's find somebody who can pay the rent. You have to pivot. You have to be flexible. And you're managing your delinquency. It's a whole new level than what I was used to before, for sure.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this is setting, being honest with the residents, being kind, but setting clear expectations. Again, it's the clear communication, and it's community engagement. Like Sido said, know your residents by name, have interactions with them. Certainly, we have no money, so I think sometimes the first thing that goes out the window is sort of the resident activities, but that's really how you build community, right? Is getting the residents together, getting them out of the units, getting them talking to each other. The more invested they are in your community and in where they live, the more likely they are to prioritize rent payment, the more likely they are to prioritize good behavior. Most people, and maybe I'm naive, but I think most people want to be good neighbors. They want to live in a community where they like the people that live around them, they enjoy their housing, and so if you allow that outlet, folks will typically have slightly better behavior. And so, really getting your manager to get out from behind the desk and interact with people. And as they're, leaving for work or coming home, hey, Christopher, how's your day? Christopher's going to be like, oh, she's going to say hi to me, and I haven't paid my rent, and I had a big party on Friday night. I don't even have to go in the back door now, and so if Christopher knows that the manager's looking at him, then maybe, folks act a little better.
Well, and I think to Suzanne's point, are you guys noticing a path that we're all talking about? What is it? It's communication. We shut down communication during COVID, right? Everybody was at home. Everybody was locked in their bubble. Everything was electronic. It was everything. It is not the way anymore. And I understand that we should still keep distances and there's things that have happened, but we got to get back to communication. People don't read a notice. I'm sorry. They never have, though. And we're treating it like it's a new world. It is not. It is about delinquency. How do I get delinquency? I tell them, I empathize with your plight. I'm sorry you're behind. When can you pay me? Right? Like, okay, great. I know it's not coming today, so I'm not going to punish you because it's not coming today. What day is it coming? Right? Like, I'm not going to treat him like he's terrible. I'm just going to say, what day are you paid? Oh, you don't know when you're going to be able to pay him? Unfortunately, I may have to start some legal proceedings, just so you know. Right? Because I can't not have you pay. Same thing with our paperwork. So you don't want to come. I get it, but there's a consequence to that. Right?
I think another thing we've seen is that we need to really manage our delinquency. So, your managers get so far behind, the delinquency report is 22 pages long. Like, that's a lot, right? And it's hard to be looking at that every month and to really audit each of those ledgers every month. That it becomes a lot in addition to having to answer to Jody and compliance and all the other things that are going on. But really, it's super important that we review our ledgers every month and make sure that they're accurate, and make sure that even if we're not going forward, if we're choosing to move forward with a eviction based on behavior or based on compliance, the resident needs to know how much they owe. They need to know that every single month. So send them a notice every single month saying, here's your balance. Sometimes they'll come in and say, I thought I paid, or I did it through the ACH and did it not go through, or how do I owe this much? They have subsidy, but their subsidy changed, and either we didn't get notified or they didn't get notified. And we need to make sure that we know and that they know and that we're in agreement with them on how much they owe. Whether it's $5, because those little amounts add up, or whether it's $20,000, right? It's being very clear every month that here's your current balance.
I have a 30-day notice for Seattle. Who's never seen one? You all have seen a 30-day notice we give to our resident? You haven't? Yeah, I want you to just look at it.
Well, and it's we're talking real stuff, right? It actually happened to my Gen Zer. She had a small balance that became a giant balance because nobody gave her a notice. It was auto pay. She didn't adjust her auto pay until it was a massive problem. Can you imagine the panic she had at 21 years old? Like, why do I owe this much money? And where did this come from? And it was $135 a month that she would have paid had she known. We're so focused on these large balances that we're not collecting the stuff we can get. And then we made a process for a young adult unachievable for her to be able to overcome that balance. So now you have a delinquent tenant, right? So those small balances are really important.
For me, when I started back in Seattle, was who's my best friend at Plymouth or at Seattle Housing Authority or for the HEN program, mainly because some of the subsidy, like rent portion and subsidy portion, changed so many times, and we were charging the wrong amount, or we were not receiving the right amount, I guess I should say. And ultimately, some ledger got really messed up, and a lot of residents flew under the radar because all was charged to subsidy, and they actually had a rent portion, and we didn't know. And now we have to fix that, go 6 months back, right, and get the contract amendments. And so I've been working really hard with my manager to be like, do you even know what this agency, so Seattle Housing Authority, for example, look like? Like maybe have a Zoom call, create a relationship somehow so you can have what you need in a timely manner. One of the things I experience as well is when people move in and they have promissory pay, in agencies like I promised you first last month, whatever. I'm lucky to get enough that payment like 3-4 months later. So at what point do I make the resident responsible for that past due balance when they barely make it, like right now to pay rent? So
Quick show of hands, you guys. How many of you guys don't pay your mortgage or your rent every month? Right? If you guys are obligated to it, I know that it's not achievable for some people and that the struggle's real, but nobody in this room doesn't pay theirs, right? Mm-hmm. Why is it not okay for us to say, in order to live, you have to pay the rent?
But additionally, people that come with subsidy have this misconception that they're only responsible for the portion of rent. And they don't sign, when they sign a lease, right, like Seattle Housing Authority or agency partner are going to pay for the rest. I'm really like going back to my manager saying you need to re-educate your resident that ultimately they're responsible for the full amount. If subsidy doesn't come through, it's for you to pay. So find this engagement, because I think during COVID and even before COVID, we're trying to push folks in the house. And, the resident is like, okay, I'm here. And then case manager are scrambling for the subsidy piece, and I'm like, we need to put that back on the resident and get some kind of engagement. And then they can take their 30-day notice and go to the subsidy provider and say, hey, we're having an issue here. So, they can.
We're seeing folks, occasionally get, termed for unit conditions, or they haven't done their paperwork with SHA, and they're not clear that it's their responsibility, right? Who doesn't get paid, or who suffers the consequences when they get termed? It's the property. And so that's another reason why you really need to be on top of understanding who owes what and making sure that you're following through. Because if you're not getting the check from the housing authority for that portion of the rent, why? Is it that the housing authority didn't get paperwork they needed from you? Like, did you not send the lease in for the move-in? Did the unit fail the HQS inspection and you need to resolve something in order to start the payments? But if you're not auditing your ledgers every month and you don't realize, and months go by and you don't realize you didn't get that payment, it's really hard to go back and get it again, right? And it's hard to hold the, morally, can you hold the resident accountable to that when you didn't follow up?
Well, it goes back
but-
to who's your best friend at each agency?
Yeah.
Really, I have a person she can literally get anybody from the housing authority to respond in like 30 minutes because of her engagement with them, right? She has developed those relationships. The manager has been, I send, nothing. She will come in and in 20 minutes have a check for all the back stuff that was missing. So who's your best friend? This is fun.
Well, I'm going to just tell you a story that just happened recently to one of my buildings. So the famous Unit 406. We'll have one. So the resident came through, I think, Hen, and then got terminated. And somehow we noticed a lot of traffic in that unit. It's right downtown Seattle, and it's very conveniently located. So we noticed a lot of traffic, and then residents started complaining about, theft of packages and whatnot. And of course, I had one manager who was absolutely great performer, and this unit was kind of causing trouble because we realized there's drug activity and people were doing drugs actually in the unit and in the hallway. And for those who don't know, like when people get really high, sometimes they actually defecate, wherever they're at. And Sarah came in one morning, and she was probably 3-4 months in. Gave her a great 90-day review, great on her paperwork, and then she came in, and there was, human feces in the lobby, and she turned around and resigned on the spot. So I had to find another manager. I'm telling her, I'm so sorry, it's not supposed to be like this, we can go over the hump, right? And she looks at me and she goes, well, I gave that 30-day, but we're missing pages, so we have to start all over again. So here goes the clock again, right? So then I'm going back to the attorney again, so we're making sure we have all the notices, and also they say you can only give one notice at a time. I think you should try to give more than one notice at a time and see which ones stick at the end, because the resident will know which one you posted, I think, but that's playing poker. But I won one time, so anyway. So moving forward, we realized the resident actually was subleasing, the unit, and there was not necessarily just drug, but there was also porn on the internet. And then near this building, you have a little parking that is not for resident, but again, conveniently located where people can just make a UE and the drugs would be coming out. I witnessed it myself. And I'm like, this is bananas, right? And I'm calling the police. I have security. I have cameras. Nothing is working. And now I have a new manager, right? So I'm like, okay, here's the onboarding. That's going to be fun. And I had resident service, however, with whom I'm very good friend with, and I'm like, we're going to go at it with all angle, right? So I call the police. The police doesn't care. But I'm calling them, and then now I plastered notices in the building saying, please call the police if you see any illegal activities. So now the whole building is engaged, right? And ultimately what I ended up doing is when we met the resident, and he's like, I don't live there anymore. And I said, I noticed, but I'll give you $2,000 if you get those guys out. And he got very offended, and then I realized that actually this resident who could not live in his home was getting preyed on. And they took over the whole unit. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, you're like 5 months behind, let's work on a payment plan and everything. And at the end he goes, my best bet is, after everything that's happened, my best bet is to move out. I'm like, you already moved out. And he goes, well, let me see what I can do to help. And then we play poker face with the people in the building saying, I have the police. We also at Bellwether hire a safety manager, and he was with me, and he's previous law enforcement. And we showed up dressed kind of like for the part, and we're like, you have to walk out. We have the keys now. And they actually moved out. It was a miracle. About, 10 people came out to get those folks out of this unit, and it's a tiny little bit studio. Now we don't have any issue and everything, but this was about half a year. Probably took me 80 hours of my time and my staff time just to get those folks out. And this was not thanks to the eviction system, and it was not thanks to the police.
Well, and I think that's the big thing, you guys, for upper level management, to understand cash for keys actually saves you money. You're not sitting with a vacant unit, basically, because they're not paying. So you need to treat it the same way you would vacancy loss. How much is it going to cost me to get someone who pays back in it? $5,000 is actually nothing with what we're seeing. To be honest, it's cheaper.
I'm going to do the PSA public service announcement on this, and the sort of the asterisks at the bottom. Cash for keys and mutual terminations can be abused. If you are not managing your managers to understand the circumstances under which these are being offered or being forced onto folks, you can get into some trouble. So have a policy, have a way that you are reviewing it at a higher level that allows that empowers the manager to be able to use these tools, but use them as tools that are designed, come into it with a thought of you're going to help the resident, it's best for everyone involved, and come at it from a place of is not a punitive thing.
But you can't do it because they don't like you.
Yeah, right? You know, you can't do it because those people just aren't paying their rent and they can afford it and they drive this nice car and da-da-da-da. Like, you know, have a policy in place that sort of takes that judgment out of it, but use the tools that you have at your disposal, right? I've always been the person that said, mutual terminations are wrong, they've been abused, like, it's coercive, whatever. I'm not there anymore. I think there's ways that you can do it where it's actually helpful and can be positive for both the community and the resident that you're trying to
And
move on.
I think it allows some hassle to leave a property with dignity, you know, like they're choosing to move out. It's just kind of switching the script. Any questions? Anyone?
I was just wondering also. I realize it's not an eviction when you do the cash for keys thing. So.
Yeah, you have to treat it as no harm, no foul.
Okay.
That you have to do. Same as with a mutual term. It has to be a no harm, no foul. When you're doing a mutual term, you're saying, we are agreeing to overlook this in order to let you out and be gone.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, that's just my concern.
you got one there, Suzanne.
I have a pretty loud voice. Question, how do you code cash for keys? Oh, sorry. How do you code cash for keys? What do you code that under? Rent loss, expense, marketing?
I mean, everybody has their own, yeah, exactly, their own account codes, right, that they use for stuff. But, I mean, typically we'll use it as like maybe a concession or resident relations code or something like that. One of the questions on the Hoova app is, you know, how do you explain to your auditor that you paid someone to leave? Yeah, you could code it as legal.
It's about what you would spend on the eviction process.
You could, yeah, exactly.
I just wondered how auditors looked at it. We don't know yet.
It's something that's been used in the past, and I don't know that an auditor's ever asked that question. Yeah, as it becomes more like they see a line item that you spent $50,000 on cash for keys. Yeah, you might have to come up with an explanation, right? Yeah, that's why I said that was my
policy.
PSA, right? Have a policy.
How do you say, I paid this person $2,500, oh, but this person I gave him $5,000 because he was better negotiator or tenant? How do you handle that?
Have a policy, right? Figure out what that is. You want to do it in advance. You want to understand what you're willing to pay, at what level. You know, maybe you say if somebody that owes $20,000, we'll give them $5,000 to move out. If you say, hey, this person's got, you know, massive behavioral issues and they've caused 4 of their neighbors to move, so I'm willing to pay, you know. But think of it in advance. Don't, you know, you're going to save yourself some fair housing issues if you have a written policy, if you have a plan, as opposed to just doing it on the fly, right? Any other ideas, questions, thoughts?
So what
Are you horrified by this?
Yeah, what we're hoping you guys understand is we are all functioning. All of our companies are functioning, but we wanted to be transparent with you guys because it's not easy right now. So we wanted to give the truth is we're big companies and we're gonna be okay, but what about the little ones? These are some things you've got to look at.
Earlier, I said, you know, we defer fees, and it was mentioned that that goes, you know, uphill. But for all the developers in the room and the funders in the room, this has a serious impact on our ability to continue to develop new real estate. Eventually, we defer fees, we pay cash into the properties to cover expenses that aren't being covered by the mortgage. You know, the pot's not full anymore. And we have liquidity requirements. We have debt coverage ratio requirements. I cringe when I produce the annual schedule of real estate owned properties and send that out to our investors. And then I brace for the questions that come and the hours I spend with my asset managers answering the questions about how are we covering these expenses? What's the plan for how we're going to get things back on track? And we're between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, I take a lot of pride in my work. I take a lot of pride in that my properties have performed. I've historically been someone that can go in, spot the issues, get them resolved, make a property perform. I'm not being successful anymore in that to the way that I was. I think I'm addressing the issues as much as I possibly can, but I'm having conversations with my investors in the past. The conversations with the investors are like, hey, yeah, it's great. You're going to get a check. Yeah, we're good. We're working on this issue over here, but, we'll have it resolved in a month. We're having hard conversations. I'm having hard conversations with WNC. I'm getting calls like, I've got, properties on the watch list, and what are you going to do to get them off, the watch list? And I'm having to say, not a damn thing.
Well, and I've talked to
Right?
investors
Like,
and
I can't
syndicators more than
do
I
it.
ever have.
We're talking to
Ever.
Yeah.
So,
What?
WNC.
It's a limited partner investor.
Yeah, just a quick question. I suspect this is illegal because nobody's mentioned it yet, but what?
Yes, illegal ideas.
Yeah, in your policy, and if you say you haven't paid 2-3 months, we're going to change the locks on your doors. Is that?
No.
You can't do it. So that's illegal. And why? What's the rationale behind that being legal? Is there rationale? I mean, I don't.
It's specifically illegal.
It's not
in
Texas.
In the RCW.
You can't just. You just can't do it, huh? Okay, just curious.
that was good.
I was at an asset management conference in June, and another option that was being thrown around in the room was meeting with the residents and saying, I just need you to start getting current. You're concerned about the past. I just need you to start getting current. So here's the deal. For every month you are current, I will apply it to current rent, and I will forgive 1 month in the past.
We did that in Alaska, with our portfolio in Alaska, because we had folks that were really far behind, and it worked. We tried to do it in Seattle and had much less success. But it's an option. Yeah, it's a great option.
Well, and that's what we've learned talking to each other. I mean, she was fortunate to work with me at one point in her life, but I just got to meet her, and I've learned a lot, right? I might just be in compliance, but I've learned a lot from them. They've shared things with me that are helping me be engaged, reach out. I think it's really important. I actually have a standing quarterly meeting with my developers because it is important that we talk about development in the compliance aspect. It's actually important. I didn't know what a drop dead date was. Found out the hard way. But knowing those things, we touch base now. Having those communications across the entities is important. I got one right behind you. A drop dead date, it means they've extended the loan to the point where they're not going to do it anymore. And if you don't get it in, it costs a lot of money. But I didn't know, right? I didn't know. I'm like, well, we'll get you the files when we get you the files.
Yeah.
We're doing the best we can. Oh, no, that's not an option when you're on that.
Yeah, when you have a conversation with the developer, it gives them the opportunity to update the reality in their performance, how they're projecting out what it's going to cost for the next development.
Right, and I may tell you something that you don't want to hear, but it's the reality.
Right.
Right, and so we're not sitting in ours going, oh, those developers do this to us all the time. I now have an understanding of what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm.
But in return, you have an understanding
Exactly.
of the mountains that we have to climb to get that done for you.
Right.
I literally had a conversation yesterday with a developer who was like, hey, our next project's coming up. We're going to get CFO pretty soon. And let's, we want I'm like, okay, great. What's the adjuster schedule? Like, when do we have to have it all whatever. And he was like, oh, okay, well, we really want to get it leased up within 90 days, and we don't want to have any concessions. What? I'm like, I'm going to need to see your schedule because I know it doesn't say 90 days and I know it doesn't have anything on the concession. So let's talk about this. It turns out, we need to convert our loan by the end of next year, and, we're probably going to get, the building in February. And I'm like, okay, let's work backwards, right? But, that's sort of the expectation, and that used to be. We used to be able to get a building and get it, as soon as we got keys, we were moving in as many people as we could physically do paperwork with in a day, as many, U-Hauls as we could have in the front of the building, and, elevator was like, people were literally fist fighting over it, but we did get people moved in. It's not a thing, right? We have a housing crisis, right? So everybody thinks like there's not enough housing in Seattle for everybody. We have a housing crisis. What we're telling you today is that we're looking at a crisis in our housing.
And we're looking at a crisis in our staffing since we went rogue. But we do need to talk about staffing. For me, let me tell you, when it comes to the compliance end of it, it's about 2 years before people actually know what they're doing. Let me be very clear. Most of our staff's been here how long? 90 days, right? The turnover has been insane. So I need those of you dealing with these new staff, understand, give them patience and grace. Compliance is not easy because what are we now? We're CPAs.
Hey, Jody, we got 3 minutes.
I know. That's why I'm squirreling into this.
We'll just
That's why I went to staffing. See?
Yeah. We got to close it up.
Yeah, we're closing.
Good.
That's what we're doing. Staffing. So be patient with your staff, though. It's not an easy learn.
It's not. And communicate. Again, community engagement, engage with your developers, engage with your investors, and let's engage with the agencies and look at how we are going to make this a little bit easier to manage these assets.
So we're throwing up these last slides for you guys to kind of see because we don't want to make you late for lunch. But these are all important things. And I think it kind of goes to what we've been saying, right? Everybody needs to be engaged all the way across. It's really important. I understand I'm compliance, but I'm a necessary component of affordable housing. You got to get that part right. Otherwise, you can do what? You pay it back. So we want to give you guys the tools, but everybody needs to look at it from a perspective of, okay, I tried that, it didn't work, what's next?
And tell everybody what didn't work and what's
Yes. Learned a lot from them, I did. I hope you learned something from me.
Of course, Jody. It goes without saying.
So
every time I talk to you, I learn something new.
I know, things she never wanted to know.
No, I want to know. It's always fun.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm brand new back in the industry after a 10-year absence. And so I'm just curious, what kind of credit loss are you all seeing in your monthly, are we looking at like 40% credit loss every month from no one paying rent?
We're not allowed to talk about that. I'm kidding. No, but yeah, right? Yeah,
I'm trying to catch up from those who didn't pay rent during COVID.
I'm just trying to get people to do paperwork.
And I'm just trying to have managers happy at work and remembering, like what's the mission, welcome home is in your house. Just go back to the basics.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be available if you guys have any other questions, but I want to thank you for coming.
Thank you.